What if a simple act of kindness was a lie? A waitress exhausted after a 12-hour shift faces a 7-mile walk through the dangerous Los Angeles night. Suddenly, a Rolls-Royce pulls up. A billionaire Noah Croft offers her a ride, a luxury condo, a new life. It sounds like a dream, but for Amelia Hayes, it becomes a waking nightmare. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a story of deception, a locked room holding a dark secret and a dead girl's diary that could expose a truth so explosive it could get them all killed. Stay with us. The flickering neon sign of the Daily Grind diner cast a sickly green and pink glow onto the rain-slicked pavement of downtown Los Angeles. For Amelia Mia Hayes, that sign was both a beacon of survival and a daily reminder of her seemingly endless struggle. At 24, Mia's life was a monotonous loop of taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and fending off the overly familiar advances of late-night patrons. Tonight was no different. A grueling 12-hour shift had left her bones aching, and her spirit feeling as damp and heavy as the thick LA air. Her last table, a group of boisterous college students celebrating a birthday, had left her a measly $2 tip on a $100 tab. It was a final, stinging slap in the face after a day of forced smiles and relentless hustle. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all her unfulfilled dreams, Mia untied the stained apron from around her waist and hung it on its designated hook in the cramped staff room. Her worn-out sneakers, a size too big, and bought from a second-hand store, offered little comfort as she stepped out into the deserted streets. The bus, her usual chariot of exhaustion, had stopped running an hour ago. That meant a 7-mile walk home to her tiny, closet-sized apartment in a less than desirable part of the city. It was a walk she'd made more times than she could count, a journey that took her through a cross-section of urban decay and forgotten neighborhoods. Each step was a gamble, a silent prayer that she would make it home without incident. Tonight, the city felt particularly menacing. The rain had washed the grime from the sidewalks into swirling, murky puddles that reflected the distorted neon lights. The usual cacophony of swans and distant traffic seemed to be closing in, amplifying her sense of vulnerability. She clutched the strap of her threadbare backpack, the meager contents a half-eaten granola bar, a well-worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and her empty wallet, offering no real protection. As she navigated the labyrinth of dimly lit streets, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a silent stop beside her. The sudden, almost predatory stillness of the luxury car sent a jolt of fear through Mia's already frayed nerves. The tinted windows were opaque, hiding the occupant from view. She quickened her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. In this part of town, a car like that usually meant one of two things: trouble, or a very lost, very wealthy tourist. Either way, she wanted no part of it. The back window purred down, revealing a man whose face seemed to be carved from expensive stone. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with a mane of silver hair impeccably styled and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He wore a bespoke suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. There was an aura of power and authority about him that was both intimidating and strangely calming. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice a low, cultured rumble that seemed out of place amidst the urban squalor. "Are you all right? It's quite late to be walking alone in this area." Mia's first instinct was to ignore him, to keep walking, and pretend she hadn't heard. But something in his gaze, a flicker of genuine concern, made her pause. Still, she kept a cautious distance. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice coming out a little shakier than she intended. "Forgive my intrusion," the man continued, but my driver and I couldn't help but notice you've been walking for quite some time. Please allow us to give you a ride." Mia's mind raced. Every warning bell she'd ever heard about strange men in expensive cars was screaming in her head. Yet as she looked at him at the chauffeur in the front seat, who hadn't so much as glanced in her direction, a different thought emerged. What if he was just being kind? The sheer exhaustion of her body and the prospect of a warm, dry ride were incredibly tempting. I don't know," she stammered. "My mum always told me not to get into cars with strangers." A faint smile touched the man's lips. A wise woman. "My name is Noah Croft, and I assure you my intentions are honorable. I'm on my way home from a late business meeting, and it would trouble my conscience to leave you to walk the rest of the way." Noah Croft. The name didn't immediately ring a bell, but it sounded important. Still hesitant, Mia took a half-step closer, peering into the opulent interior of the car. It was like a miniature palace on wheels, all plush leather and polished wood. The scent of expensive cologne and old money wafted out. "Where do you live?" he asked gently. When she told him the address, a flicker of something pity perhaps crossed his face. It was a look she was all too familiar with. "That's still a fair distance from here," he said. "Please allow me. I'll have my driver Michael take you to your door. I will get out here and have another car sent for me if it makes you feel more comfortable." The offer to have him get out was what finally swayed her. It was a gesture of respect, an acknowledgement of her fear. With a final deep breath, she nodded. "Okay. Thank you." The door opened with a soft, expensive thud. As Mia slid onto the leather seat, a wave of warmth enveloped her, a stark contrast to the cold, damp night she had left behind. The car moved off with a smoothness that felt like floating. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Mia allowed her tired muscles to relax. She leaned her head back against the soft headrest and closed her eyes just for a moment. When she opened them again, they were not on the familiar run-down street of her apartment building. Instead, they were cruising through one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Los Angeles, an area of sprawling mansions and manicured lawns she had only ever seen in movies. Panic began to bubble in her chest. This isn't the way to my apartment," she said, her voice tight with renewed fear. Noah Croft turned to her, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the car. "I know," he said calmly. "I'm taking you somewhere else." The quiet hum of the Rolls-Royce suddenly sounded menacing. The luxurious interior felt like a gilded cage. Mia's mind reeled. She had made a terrible, terrible mistake. She was trapped. Her hand instinctively flew to the door handle, but she knew it would be useless. The doors were undoubtedly locked. Every horror story she'd ever dismissed as overly dramatic came rushing back to her, each one more terrifying than the last. She was at the mercy of this stranger, a man whose name she barely knew. A man who was taking her to an unknown destination in the dead of night. The city lights blurred past the window, each one a silent witness to her abduction. Her 12-hour shift and the long walk home now seemed like a distant, almost idyllic memory compared to the terrifying uncertainty that lay ahead. The real-life drama of Mia Hayes was just beginning, and she had a dreadful feeling that the final act would be a tragedy. The Rolls-Royce finally came to a stop in front of a towering high-rise building that seemed to scrape the clouds. The lobby was a symphony of marble glass and a chandelier that looked like it had been stolen from a royal palace. A doorman in a crisp white uniform rushed to open the car door. his face a mask of professional deference. "Mr. Croft," he said, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on fear. "Welcome back." Noah Croft simply nodded his attention still on Mia, who was frozen in her seat, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "Where are we?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is the apex," he replied, as if that explained everything. "I own it." He owned the entire building. The statement hung in the air as heavy and imposing as the skyscraper itself. Mia's mind struggled to process the sheer scale of his wealth. She had gone from serving $2 tippers to being in the presence of a man who owned a building that probably housed more money than she could ever imagine. "Come," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Let's get you out of the cold." Her legs felt like lead as she followed him into the opulent lobby. The air inside was warm and smelled faintly of jasmine. Every surface gleamed under the soft, recessed lighting. She felt a deep, gnawing sense of being out of place, her worn sneakers squeaking on the polished marble floor. The doorman's eyes flickered over her tattered clothes, a silent judgment that made her skin crawl. They rode a private elevator, its walls lined with dark, polished mahogany. The ascent was so smooth and silent, it felt like they were being lifted into another dimension. When the doors opened, they stepped directly into a penthouse apartment that was larger than the entire diner where she worked. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a breathtaking, panoramic view of the Los Angeles skyline. The city lights, which had seemed so menacing from the street, were now a glittering carpet of diamonds spread out at her feet. This is your home?" Mia asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "One of them." Noah replied, his voice casual, as he shrugged off his expensive coat and draped it over a minimalist armchair that looked more like a piece of modern art than a place to sit. He then walked over to a sleek, state-of-the-art kitchen that was larger than her entire apartment. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked, his back to her, as he opened a stainless steel refrigerator that was stocked with an array of beverages she didn't even recognize. Water juice, or perhaps something a little stronger. Mia's head was spinning. She needed answers, not a drink. "Why did you bring me here, Mr. Croft? What do you want from me?" He turned to face her, a bottle of sparkling water in his hand. His expression was serious, almost paternal. "I brought you here because I couldn't in good conscience leave you to walk home in the middle of the night to a place that is clearly not safe. And as for what I want from you, I want to offer you a proposition." He gestured to a plush white sofa that looked like it had never been sat on. Hesitantly, Mia perched on the edge of the cushion, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Noah sat in the armchair opposite her, his stormy eyes studying her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "I have a daughter," he began, his voice softening slightly. "Her name is Isabella. She's around your age. A few years ago, she was in a difficult situation. She was in trouble, and she was too proud to ask for help. By the time I found out, it was almost too late." He paused, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "Seeing you tonight, walking alone in the dark, so determined, yet so vulnerable, it reminded me of her. It stirred something in me, something I haven't felt in a long time." Mia listened, her initial fear slowly being replaced by a cautious curiosity. She still didn't trust him, but his story resonated with her own fierce pride and her reluctance to ask for help. "I'm a very wealthy man, Mia," he continued, his voice regaining its business-like tone. "I have more money than I could ever spend in a dozen lifetimes. But it can't buy back the time I lost with my daughter. It can't erase the mistakes I made. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. I want to offer you a place to stay, here in this building. I have a vacant condominium on the 30th floor. It's fully furnished, 2 bedrooms, all expenses paid. I will also provide you with a chauffeur, the same one who drove you here tonight, Michael. He will take you to and from your job or anywhere else you need to go. You will be safe, and you will have a comfortable place to live. Mia stared at him, speechless. A luxury condo. A private chauffeur. It sounded like a fantasy, a fairy tale. It was too good to be true. There had to be a catch. Why she finally managed to ask. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. As I said, he replied, you remind me of my daughter. Let's just say this is my way of atoning for past failures, atoning for not being there for her when she needed me most. Think of it as a philanthropic gesture, an investment in someone I believe has potential. He saw the skepticism in her eyes. There are no strings attached, Mia. I'm not asking for anything in return. You can continue to work at the diner, or you can quit. You can go to school, pursue your dreams, whatever you wish. All I ask is that you accept my offer. Allow me to provide you with a safe and stable environment. Mia's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The offer was insane, preposterous. But the thought of a warm, safe place to live, of not having to make that terrifying walk home every night, was a powerful lure. The memory of the $2 tip, of the leering eyes of the diner patrons, of the gnawing hunger in her stomach, it all came rushing back to her. What did she have to lose? Her tiny roach-infested apartment. Her dead-end job. Her pride. I need to think about it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Of course, Noah said, his voice gentle. I understand. But for tonight at least, please accept my hospitality. You can stay in the guest room. It's late and you're exhausted. He stood up, a clear dismissal. He led her down a long hallway to a room that was larger than her entire living space. A king-sized bed with crisp white linens and a mountain of pillows sat in the center. A private bathroom with a rainfall shower and a bathtub the size of a small boat was attached. The door has a lock, he said, as if reading her mind. You will be perfectly safe. We can talk more in the morning. With that, he turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. Mia stood in the middle of the luxurious room, feeling like an imposter in a life that wasn't hers. She walked over to the window and looked out at the glittering city below. From this height, the world seemed so different, so full of possibilities. She thought about her life, about the endless cycle of poverty and despair she was trapped in. Noah Croft's offer was a lifeline, a chance to escape. But at what cost? What did he really want from her? Was he truly a benevolent stranger, or was he a wolf in sheep's clothing, luring her into a gilded cage? With a heavy heart, she turned from the window and walked over to the bed. She sank into the soft mattress, the luxurious sheets, a stark contrast to the threadbare blankets she was used to. For the first time in a long time, she was in a safe, warm, and comfortable bed. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a deal with the devil, and that the price of her newfound security would be far higher than she could ever imagine. The drama was just unfolding, and the twists and turns were yet to come. Mia awoke to the gentle glow of morning sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment she was disoriented, the unfamiliar softness of the bed, and the quiet stillness of the room, a stark departure from her usual wake-up call of blaring car horns and shouting neighbors. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back to her in a flood of disbelief and trepidation. She was in a billionaire's penthouse, a world away from her cramped, dingy apartment. A soft knock on the door startled her. "Mia." It was Noah Croft's voice, calm and measured. "Are you awake?" "Yes," she called out, her voice still thick with sleep. "There are some fresh clothes for you outside the door. I had my assistant, a woman named Clara, purchase them for you this morning. I've also taken the liberty of having breakfast prepared. Please join me when you're ready." Mia hesitated for a moment before slowly getting out of bed. She opened the door a crack and found a collection of shopping bags from high-end boutiques she had only ever window shopped at. Inside were designer jeans, a silk blouse, and a pair of leather boots that probably cost more than her last 3 paychecks combined. The gesture was both thoughtful and unsettling. It felt like he was already trying to mold her into someone she wasn't, to erase the old Mia and create a new one that fit into his world of luxury and privilege. After a long hot shower in the rainfall shower, a luxury she hadn't realized she was missing. Until now. She dressed in the new clothes. They fit perfectly, a fact that sent a fresh wave of unease through her. How did he know her size? Had he been watching her for longer than just last night? She found Noah in the sprawling living area, nursing a cup of coffee as he read the Wall Street Journal on a tablet. A lavish breakfast spread was laid out on the large dining table. Fresh fruit pastries and an assortment of cheeses. It was more food than she was used to seeing in a week. "Good morning," he said, looking up from his tablet. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that almost made her forget her suspicions. "I trust you slept well." "Yes, thank you," she replied, her voice still a little hoarse. "Mr. Croft, about your offer." "Please," he interrupted, gently. "Call me Noah. And let's not discuss business on an empty stomach. Eat something." Mia reluctantly filled a plate and sat down at the table feeling a renewed sense of being an imposter. The silence between them was thick with unspoken questions. She wanted to grill him to demand answers, but something about his calm demeanor and the sheer absurdity of the situation kept her quiet. After a few bites of a croissant that was so buttery and flaky it melted in her mouth, she couldn't hold back any longer. "Noah," she began, her voice gaining a little more confidence. "I don't understand. Why go to all this trouble for a complete stranger? People don't just give away luxury condos and chauffeurs." He set down his tablet and gave her his full attention. "I told you, Mia. You remind me of my daughter. But it's more than that. I see a fire in you, a resilience that I admire. I believe that with the right opportunities, you could achieve great things. Consider me a patron, an investor in your potential." His words were flattering, but they still didn't sit right with her. "And what do you get out of this investment?" she asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Satisfaction," he replied simply. "The satisfaction of knowing that I've helped someone who deserves it. The world is a cruel and unfair place, Mia. I'm in a position to make it a little less so for one person. Is that so hard to believe? It was. For someone like Mia, who had been let down and disappointed by people her entire life. His altruism seemed too good to be true. But as she looked into his stormy eyes, she saw a flicker of something that she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't malice, but it wasn't pure benevolence either. It was something more complex, something hidden in the depths of his gaze. "I'll need to get my things from my apartment," she said, her voice betraying her cautious acceptance of his offer. It was a test, a way to see how he would react. "Of course," he said without hesitation. "Michael will take you whenever you're ready, and don't worry about your lease. I'll have my legal team take care of it." His efficiency was both impressive and alarming. It was clear that he was a man who was used to getting what he wanted, a man for whom money could solve any problem. Later that day, Mia found herself back in the familiar grimy hallway of her apartment building. The contrast between this world and Noah's was jarring. The smell of stale cigarette smoke and boiled cabbage filled the air. Her apartment, which had once been her sanctuary, now felt small and suffocating. As she packed her meager belongings into a few cardboard boxes, her best friend Sarah burst through the door, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Mia, I've been calling you all morning. I was so worried when you didn't come home last night." Mia quickly explained the events of the previous night, her voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Sarah listened, her eyes growing wider with each new detail. "A billionaire, a luxury condo. A chauffeur." Sarah's voice was filled with a healthy dose of skepticism. "Mia, this sounds like something out of a cheesy romance novel. Are you sure this guy isn't some kind of creep? What if he's a human trafficker?" "He's not a creep," Mia insisted, though a part of her still harbored the same fears. "He's been a perfect gentleman. And his name is Noah Croft. I looked him up online. He's a real estate mogul, one of the richest men in the country." "That doesn't mean he's not a creep," Sarah retorted. "Rich men are the creepiest of all. They think they can buy anything and anyone." Her friend's words echoed her own doubts, but Mia pushed them aside. "He just wants to help me, Sarah. He said I remind him of his daughter." The long-lost daughter sob story. "Mia, that's a classic line. You need to be careful. Don't trust him." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Michael the chauffeur, his imposing presence filling the small doorway. He was there to collect her boxes. His stoic, almost robotic demeanor did little to ease Sarah's suspicions. As Mia was about to leave her old life behind, Sarah grabbed her arm, her eyes pleading. "Mia, please promise me you'll be careful. Don't let this guy control you. And if you need anything at all, you call me. Day or night." Mia promised, but as she stepped into the back of the Rolls-Royce, leaving her old life and her worried friend behind, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a world she didn't understand, a world with its own set of rules and its own hidden dangers. The condo on the 30th floor was even more impressive than she had imagined. It was a sprawling two-bedroom apartment with panoramic views of the city. The refrigerator was fully stocked, the closets were filled with new clothes, and there was a brand new laptop on the desk in the home office. It was a life she had only ever dreamed of, a life that had been handed to her on a silver platter. But as the days turned into weeks, Mia's initial awe began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Noah was true to his word. He never made any inappropriate advances, never asked for anything in return. He would occasionally call to check in on her, his voice always polite and respectful. Michael the chauffeur was always at her beck and call, a silent, ever-present guardian. She continued to work at the diner, a decision that seemed to amuse Noah. The contrast between her two lives was stark. By day, she was a humble waitress, serving greasy food to ungrateful customers. By night, she was the resident of a luxury condo, a woman of leisure. But the gilded key, however beautiful, was still a cage. She was constantly aware of Noah's invisible presence in her life. His money had paid for everything she owned, everything she touched. She felt a growing sense of obligation to him, a debt she could never repay. And then there were the little things, the things that didn't add up. One evening, while exploring her new apartment, she stumbled upon a locked room. It was the only room in the entire apartment that she couldn't access. When she asked Noah about it, he was dismissive, saying it was just a storage closet for some of his personal belongings. But his evasiveness only piqued her curiosity. What was he hiding in that room? Another time, she overheard a hushed conversation between Noah and Michael. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, almost angry. When they saw her, they immediately fell silent, their faces unreadable. Her suspicions were further fueled by Sarah, who was convinced that Noah was hiding something. "I did some more digging on your billionaire benefactor," Sarah said during one of their frequent phone calls. "There are a lot of rumors about him, Mia. Stories about his ruthless business, dealings, his estranged family, and a daughter who, well, let's just say there are conflicting reports about what happened to her." Sarah's words sent a chill down Mia's spine. The story about his daughter Isabella, the very foundation of his supposed benevolence, was now in question. Who was Noah Croft, really? A grieving father trying to atone for his past mistakes, or a manipulative billionaire with a dark secret? Mia knew that she had to find out the truth. She had to know what was in the locked room and what had really happened to Isabella Croft. Her life had become a real-life drama, and she was the unwitting star. The twists and turns were becoming more frequent, more dangerous, and she had a feeling that the biggest, most shocking revelation was yet to come. The gilded cage was starting to feel more and more like a trap, and Mia was determined to find the key no matter what the cost. The locked room became an obsession for Mia. It was a tangible symbol of the secrets Noah was keeping, a constant reminder that her new life, as luxurious as it was built on a foundation of unanswered questions. Her days were spent in a state of hyper-vigilance, her nights filled with restless dreams of hidden rooms and shadowy figures. She tried to pick the lock using a bobby pin and a tutorial she found online, but it was a high-tech electronic lock that was impervious to her amateurish attempts. She even considered trying to get Michael's fingerprints, but the man was as elusive and untouchable as a ghost. Her frustration grew with each passing day, fueling her determination to uncover the truth. She started paying more attention to the little details, the subtle nuances of Noah's behavior, the fleeting expressions that crossed his face when he thought she wasn't looking. One evening, Noah invited her to a charity gala. "It's for a good cause," he had said, "and it would be a good opportunity for you to experience a different side of life." Mia was hesitant. The thought of being surrounded by the city's elite, the 1% she had only ever served from a distance, was intimidating. But she also saw it as an opportunity, a chance to observe Noah in his natural habitat, to see how he interacted with his peers. Clara, Noah's ever-efficient assistant, provided her with a stunning emerald green evening gown that made her feel like a princess. As she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The tired, overworked waitress was gone, replaced by a poised and elegant woman. But underneath the designer dress and the professionally applied makeup, she was still Mia, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks, the girl with a secret mission. The gala was a blur of champagne, glittering jewels, and insincere smiles. Mia felt like she was on display, a curiosity for the rich and powerful. She clung to Noah's side, his presence, her only anchor in this sea of opulence. It was during a stilted conversation with a real estate tycoon and his surgically enhanced wife that Mia had her first breakthrough. The wife, a woman named Beatrice, was gushing about Noah's generosity. "He's such a dear," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Ever since the tragic loss of his darling Isabella, he's become such a philanthropist. It's his way of coping, you know." "Her loss?" Mia asked, her heart skipping a beat. I thought she was just estranged." Beatrice's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise in her carefully made-up face. "Oh, you didn't know how dreadful." "She died, my dear. A terrible accident. A boating accident in the Mediterranean a few years ago." Noah was devastated. He never talks about it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Isabella was dead. Noah had lied to her. The entire premise of his kindness, the story of the daughter who reminded him of her, was a carefully constructed fabrication. Why would he lie about something so tragic? What was he hiding? The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Mia went through the motions, smiling and nodding, but her mind was racing. Every word Noah had ever said to her was now cast in a new, sinister light. When they returned to the penthouse, the silence in the elevator was suffocating. Mia could feel Noah's eyes on her, but she couldn't bring herself to look at him. As soon as the elevator doors opened, she turned to him, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "You lied to me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Isabella is dead, isn't she?" Noah's face, for the first time since she had met him, showed a flicker of vulnerability, of genuine pain. He didn't deny it. He simply nodded, his stormy eyes filled with a sadness that seemed to swallow the light in the room. Why, she demanded, her voice rising. "Why would you lie to me about something like that? Why invent this whole story about me reminding you of her?" He sank into an armchair, his broad shoulders slumped in defeat. "Because the truth is more complicated," he said, his voice heavy with a weariness that seemed to go beyond his years. "And because, in a way, you do remind me of her. Not of who she was, but of who she could have been." He finally told her the truth, the real story of his daughter Isabella. She wasn't the troubled but resilient young woman he had described. She was a wild, reckless spirit, a girl who had been born into a world of privilege and had never known a day of hardship. She was a party girl, a socialite who flitted from one lavish event to the next, her life a never-ending quest for pleasure and excitement. She was a disappointment to me. Noah admitted, his voice raw with a pain that he had clearly kept buried for years. "I wanted her to be more, to do more with her life. We fought constantly. The last time I saw her, we had a terrible argument. I said things, unforgivable things." He told her about the boating accident, about the phone call in the middle of the night that had shattered his world. He had flown to the Mediterranean, had spent a fortune on search and rescue teams. But her body was never found. They said she was drunk, that she fell overboard. He said, his voice cracking. "But I know my daughter. She was a strong swimmer. I never believed it was an accident." He looked up at Mia, his eyes pleading for understanding. "When I saw you that night, walking home from your job, so tired yet so determined, I saw everything I had wished for in my own daughter. I saw a strength, a resilience, a will to survive that Isabella never had. And in that moment, I saw an opportunity, a chance to have a different kind of daughter. A do-over. A chance to nurture the potential that I had failed to nurture in my own child. Mia was stunned into silence. His confession was both heartbreaking and deeply disturbing. He hadn't just offered her a place to live. He had tried to cast her in the role of his dead daughter, to mold her into the person he wished Isabella had been. She was a replacement, a stand-in for a ghost. And the locked room, she asked, her voice soft. He hesitated for a moment before standing up. "Come," he said. "I'll show you." He led her to the locked door and opened it with a code on a keypad she hadn't noticed before. The room was not a storage closet. It was a bedroom, a shrine to a life that had been cut short. The walls were painted a soft pink, and the furniture was a delicate antique white. A large four-poster bed was covered in a frilly lace-trimmed comforter. On the bedside table was a silver-framed photograph of a beautiful young woman with Noah's stormy eyes and a rebellious smile, Isabella. The room was filled with her belongings, designer clothes spilling out of the closet, expensive jewelry scattered on the dresser, and a collection of celebrity magazines piled on a chair. It was a room that was frozen in time, a perfect, untouched monument to a girl who had never had to work a day in her life. Mia looked around the room, a wave of sadness washing over her. She felt a strange kinship with the girl in the photograph, a girl she had never met, a girl whose life had been so different from her own. As her eyes scanned the room, something caught her attention. It was a small, leather-bound diary, tucked away on a bookshelf almost hidden from view. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had a feeling that the answers to the remaining questions, the final shocking twist in this real-life drama, were hidden within the pages of that diary. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she had to read it. The truth about Isabella's death was within her grasp, and she had a feeling it was far more sinister than a simple boating accident. The unraveling was not yet complete, and the most dangerous part was yet to come. Mia's hand trembled as she reached for the leather-bound diary. It felt like a sacred object, a portal into a life that had been tragically cut short. She glanced at Noah, who was standing by the doorway, his face a mask of grief. He seemed to have forgotten she was even there, lost in his own painful memories. Seizing the opportunity, she slipped the diary into the pocket of her gown, her heart hammering against her ribs. She made her excuses, feigning exhaustion and emotional turmoil, and retreated to the guest room, the diary burning a hole in her pocket. Her hands shook as she opened the book, the pages filled with the looping, almost childish handwriting of a young woman she had come to feel a strange connection with. The early entries were a chronicle of a life of hedonistic excess, parties, shopping sprees, and a string of handsome, wealthy boyfriends. But as Mia read on, a darker narrative began to emerge. Isabella's seemingly carefree life was a facade, a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating weight of her father's expectations. She wrote of his controlling nature, his constant criticism, his relentless pressure for her to be someone she wasn't. She described their explosive arguments, the cruel words they exchanged, the emotional chasm that had opened up between them. But it was the final entries written in the days leading up to her death that made Mia's blood run cold. Isabella wrote of a new man in her life, a man she described as dangerous and exciting. She never mentioned his name, referring to him only as X. He was older, charming, and involved in a world that was far more thrilling and perilous than her own. She wrote of their clandestine meetings, of the secrets he whispered to her in the dead of night. He was involved in something illegal, something big, and he had promised to take her away from her father, away from her gilded cage. The final entry was dated the day of the boating accident. It was short, a few hastily scrawled sentences that were filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. Tonight is the night. X says it's time. We're leaving. Forever. I'm scared, but I'm more scared of staying here. He says I have to do one last thing for him, something to prove my loyalty. He says it's the only way to be free. I don't know if I can do it, but I have to try. Goodbye, Daddy. I hope one day you'll forgive me. The diary ended there. Mia's mind reeled. Isabella's death wasn't an accident. It was a getaway gone wrong. And this mysterious X, who was he? What was the one last thing he had asked her to do? A sudden, terrifying thought struck her. She remembered the hushed, angry conversation she had overheard between Noah and Michael. She remembered Sarah's warnings about Noah's ruthless business dealings. Could it be possible? Could Noah himself be involved in something illegal? Was it possible that X was one of his business rivals, and that Isabella had been caught in the crossfire? Her suspicions were confirmed when she found a small, hidden pocket in the back of the diary. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. It was a handwritten note, a love letter from X. But it was the signature at the bottom that made her gasp. It wasn't a name, but a symbol, a stylized C intertwined with a V. It was the logo of Croft Enterprises' biggest competitor, a powerful and notoriously ruthless corporation run by a man named Vincent Callahan, a man Noah had mentioned in passing, his voice filled with a venomous hatred. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The hushed conversations, the locked room, Noah's evasiveness. He wasn't just grieving for his daughter. He was hiding something. He was protecting his reputation, his empire. Mia knew she was in danger. She was in possession of information that could destroy Noah Croft and Vincent Callahan, two of the most powerful and dangerous men in the city. She had to get out, to go to the police. But as she was about to make a run for it, the door to her room burst open. It was Noah, his face a thunderous mask of rage. In his hand was the empty hiding place from the back of the diary. He had discovered it was missing. "What have you done?" he roared, his voice, a terrifying echo of the arguments Isabella had described in her diary. Before Mia could answer, Michael, the chauffeur, appeared behind him. His stoic expression replaced by a look of cold, hard menace. He was holding a gun. The gilded cage had become a death trap. Mia was no longer a guest, a charity case, or a replacement daughter. She was a witness, a liability, and in the world of men like Noah Croft and Vincent Callahan, liabilities were meant to be eliminated. The drama had reached its climax. The final act was about to be played out, and Mia was at the center of a deadly game of power deception and murder. Her only weapon was the truth, a truth that was hidden within the pages of a dead girl's diary, a truth that could either set her free or get her killed. The waitress who had once walked home alone in the dark was now facing a far more terrifying journey, a journey into the heart of a darkness she had never known existed. The air in the room was thick with a terrifying silence, broken only by the sound of Mia's own frantic heartbeat. The gun in Michael's hand was a cold, hard period, at the end of a sentence she was not yet ready to write. She looked from the gun to Noah's face, a maelstrom of rage and despair. In that moment she saw not a ruthless billionaire, but a broken father pushed to the brink. "Give it to me." "Mia." Noah said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched. The diary. Mia's mind raced, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Running was futile. Screaming was pointless. Her only chance was to outsmart them, to play the only card she had left. No, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. She held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "Not until you tell me the truth. All of it." A flicker of surprise crossed Noah's face. He had expected tears, pleading. He hadn't expected defiance. "What more do you want to know?" he asked, his voice laced with a bitter irony. "You've read her words. You know she was planning to run away with that parasite, Vincent Callahan." "I know she was in love with him," Mia countered, her voice gaining strength. "And I know she was afraid of you, so afraid that she was willing to do anything to escape." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, his face ashen. "That's not true," he whispered, his voice filled with a desperate denial. "Isn't it?" Mia pressed on, her voice rising with a righteous anger. "You didn't want a daughter, Noah. You wanted a successor, a carbon copy of yourself. And when she refused to be that, you pushed her away. You pushed her right into the arms of your biggest rival." The truth of her words hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Callahan didn't love her. Noah finally said, his voice raw with pain. "He was using her to get to me, to get my company." He explained that Callahan had seduced Isabella, preying on her vulnerability and her desire for rebellion. He had convinced her that he loved her, that he would give her the freedom she craved. But it was all a lie. He was using her to get information, to find a weakness in Noah's empire. The one last thing he asked her to do, Noah said, his voice barely a whisper, was to steal proprietary information from my company. A new technology I had been developing. It was worth billions. Isabella, torn between her love for Callahan and her fear of her father, had agreed. But at the last minute, she had a change of heart. She had called her father from the boat, a tearful, frantic confession. She had told him everything. "I was on my way to get her," Noah said, his voice choked with emotion. "I had my private jet on standby, but I was too late. Callahan found out she had betrayed him. He killed her. He made it look like an accident." He sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. The powerful, imposing billionaire was gone, replaced by a grieving, broken man. Mia's heart ached for him, for the tragedy of a father who had lost his daughter twice, once to his own pride and once to the cruelty of a rival. "Why didn't you go to the police?" she asked gently. And say what he replied, his voice muffled, that my daughter was a corporate spy. That she was in love with my biggest enemy. It would have ruined my company, my reputation. And there was no proof. It was her word against his, and she was gone. So he had buried the truth, creating a shrine to his daughter, a perfect, untouched monument to the girl he wished she had been. He had lived with his guilt and his grief in silence, a prisoner in his own gilded cage. And me? Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you bring me into this?" He looked up at her. his stormy eyes filled with a desperate, pleading light. "Because you were a second chance," he said. "A chance to do it right. A chance to be the father I should have been to Isabella." It was a twisted, selfish kind of love, but in that moment, Mia understood it. She understood his pain, his desperation, his flawed attempt at redemption. She walked over to him and placed the diary in his hand. "She loved you, Noah," she said softly, in her own way. She was just lost. He clutched the diary to his chest, his body racked with sobs. The dam of his grief had finally broken, and the years of pent-up pain came flooding out. As Noah wept, Mia turned her attention to Michael, who was still standing by the door, the gun now hanging limply by his side. His stoic expression had softened, replaced by a look of deep, unwavering loyalty to the man he had served for so long. Mia knew that Noah would never go to the police. He was too proud, too protective of his empire. But she also knew that Vincent Callahan could not be allowed to get away with murder. An idea began to form in her mind, a risky, audacious plan. It was a long shot, but it was the only way. The next day, a package was delivered to the offices of the Los Angeles Times. It contained a single leather-bound diary and an anonymous note that read, "The truth about Isabella Croft." The story was a sensation. The city was scandalized by the tale of the billionaire's daughter, the secret love affair with his biggest rival, and the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death. Vincent Callahan's name was plastered across every newspaper and news channel. His carefully crafted public image was shattered. His company's stock plummeted. An official police investigation was launched. Noah Croft's empire was also shaken, but he weathered the storm. The public, swayed by the tragic story of a grieving father, was surprisingly sympathetic. He emerged from the scandal bruised but not broken, a man who had finally been forced to confront his demons. A few weeks later, Mia stood on the balcony of her luxury condo, looking out at the city skyline. It was a clear, sunny day, and the world seemed to be full of new possibilities. Noah came to stand beside her. He looked older, more tired, but there was a new sense of peace about him. "You saved me, Mia," he said, his voice filled with a quiet gratitude. "You saved me from myself." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a deed, the deed to the condominium in her name. There was also a check for an amount of money that made her gasp. "It's a new beginning," he said, "for both of us." Mia looked at the deed at the check, and then back at the man who had so unexpectedly and dramatically changed her life. She had walked into his life as a tired, broke waitress, and she was walking out as a woman of means, a woman with a future. But it wasn't the money or the condo that mattered. It was the journey she had taken, the truths she had uncovered, the lives she had changed. She had walked into a real-life drama, a world of secrets and lies, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had found her own happy ending, not in a fairy tale romance with a billionaire, but in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had made a difference, that she had brought a measure of justice to a world that was often cruel and unfair. The waitress who had once walked home alone in the dark was now standing in the sunlight, the master of her own destiny. The drama was over, and a new, brighter chapter of her life was just beginning. Mia's journey from a rain-slicked street to the penthouse of a tormented billionaire proves that truth is often more dramatic than fiction. She wasn't just given a new life. She had to fight for it, unraveling a web of lies that protected a powerful man and exposed a killer. Her story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the idea that sometimes the most unlikely person can be the catalyst for justice. What did you think of Noah's motives? Was he a villain or a victim? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Mia's incredible story, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. We have new stories coming every week you won't want to miss.